Ford just leaked what's coming for the 2027 F-150. And man, one change could completely alter the truck's whole lineup. We are talking about a brand new base engine, broader V8 availability, new packages, and updates that make this a very different truck for 2027. So let's break down the 5 biggest changes and what they actually mean if you're thinking about buying one. Now, let's set the ground rules real quick. This info stems from leaked order guide reports, not an official press release from Ford headquarters. But these order guides, that's where the real story lives before the marketing team polishes it up. And if these reports hold true, Ford is quietly restructuring the core reason people buy this truck in the first place. What's sitting under the hood? This isn't just another trim level change, y'all. Ford is moving the entry point of the entire F-150 engine lineup. According to the leaked order guide, Ford is phasing out the reliable 2.7-liter EcoBoost V6 as the base engine. Replacing it, a meatier 3.0-liter twin-turbo EcoBoost V6. Why does this matter? Because the entry-level truck just got a serious displacement upgrade. The 2.7 was punchy, sure, but the 3.0-liter architecture, similar to what Ford uses in their high-performance platforms, brings a totally different torque curve. Now, while Ford hasn't officially confirmed final horsepower or torque numbers for 2027, moving up to a 3.0-liter twin-turbo inherently raises the baseline for standard performance. Extra displacement typically translates to easier low-end pulling power, addressing one of the few critiques heavy haulers had with the old 2.7. The trade-off? A larger base twin-turbo engine could bump that entry sticker price a bit higher, and fuel economy ratings are definitely gonna be under a microscope. But overall, it completely changes where the base model sits relative to the rest of the lineup. Now, if that engine swap didn't catch your attention, this next move definitely will. Ford is making the V8 easier to get, not harder. For the last few order cycles, getting the naturally aspirated 5.0-liter Coyote V8 meant sticking to specific trims. If you wanted to climb up into high-end luxury specs like the King Ranch or Platinum, Ford heavily steered you toward the EcoBoost or the PowerBoost hybrid. According to the leak, that strategy is flipping completely. The 5.0 V8 is reportedly expanding its availability right into those top-tier luxury trims for 2027. Ford is finally recognizing that a massive chunk of buyers paying top dollars still want the raw sound, simplicity, and linear power band of a good old naturally aspirated V8. Now, don't take this expansion of the V8 as a sign that Ford is abandoning electrification altogether. The 2027 F-150 is still keeping its flagship green powertrain, the 3.5-liter PowerBoost hybrid. This creates one of the most interesting internal matchups in the entire light-duty segment. You've got the 3.0-liter EcoBoost as the modern, high-tech base engine for everyday efficiency and solid boost. You've got the 5.0 V8 for that classic high RPM rumble and proven long-term simplicity. And then you've got the 3.5 PowerBoost, a total torque monster with Pro Power onboard generator functionality for job sites and camping. Ford isn't forcing one path on you anymore. They're forcing you to make a choice between 3 completely different driving philosophies. Outside of what's under the hood, Ford is tweaking the aesthetic a bit too. The leaked guide indicates a shift in the paint booth, out with a few aging shades, and in with 3 new exterior colors: birch sand, Neptune blue, and wild green. Along with the paint swap, package options are being streamlined. Expect fewer standalone options and more bundled equipment groups, a move designed to simplify manufacturing even if it limits hyper-specific custom builds. So let's step back and look at the bigger picture here. Is this 2027 update actually enough? Let's be real. This isn't a ground-up redesign. The cab structure, frame, and overall architecture remain intact. This is a targeted mid-cycle powertrain and package shift, while the true next-generation F-150 sits further down the timeline. Ford is tweaking the mechanical heart of the truck to keep it fresh, But they aren't reinventing the wheel here. And remember, the competition isn't standing still either. Ram has completely restructured its lineup around the twin-turbo Hurricane Inline-6, while leaning hard into high-tech cabin tech. Meanwhile, GM is quietly prepping its next-generation Silverado and Sierra platforms. If you currently drive a 2021 to 2024 F-150, this leak suggests you don't necessarily need to rush out to trade in unless you specifically want that new 3.0-liter base setup or you've been dying for a V8 King Ranch. But if you've been holding out on an order, 2027 might just be the sweet spot for powertrain choice. So here's the big question for you guys. If you were buying an F-150 in 2027, would you take the new 3.0-liter EcoBoost, the 5.0 V8, or the PowerBoost hybrid? Drop your choice in the comments below, because I already know the V8 guys are gonna have something to say about this one. And as soon as Ford drops official specs and final confirmation on the 2027 F-150, we'll break it down right here on USA Motor Bytes.